Have you ever stopped to think, really think, about what actually goes into planning a huge national birthday party? We're talking about America turning 250, the semi-quincentennial. It's coming up July 4, 2026. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into a pretty recent executive order. One of those presidential directives that tells the government what to do. This one's all about celebrating that massive milestone. Our mission here is to sort of unpack this order, see how it connects to, well, other efforts to honor American history, American heroes. And let me tell you, there are some twists and turns in how these things happen. Layers of policy, different goals. It gets complicated.
It really does. And what's fascinating here, I think, is just seeing the machinery involved. Planning something on this scale is, it's a huge administrative undertaking. And executive orders, like you said, they're powerful. They're how presidents often steer the ship, set policy, get the federal government moving in a certain direction. This one definitely sets out a big plan.
Right. So let's get right into it. The main event. This executive order from January 29th, 2025. It's called Celebrating America's 250th Birthday. And the order flat out says its policy is to have a grand celebration worthy of the momentous occasion for July 4, 2026. But it's not just fireworks and parades. It also talks about taking other actions to honor the history of our great nation. And here's where it gets really interesting, because it's not just like marking a date on the calendar. It seems to be about really engaging with the past.
Oh, absolutely. And to make sure that grand celebration actually happens, the order sets up something new. It's called the White House Task Force on Celebrating America's 250th Birthday. Task Force 250 for short. And this isn't some, minor committee. It's serious business. The president is the chair, the vice president is vice chair, and then there's an executive director who runs the day-to-day stuff, reporting up through the assistant to the president for domestic policy.
Okay, wow, that's top-level involvement. So who else is on this task force? Does it give us a sense of how wide-ranging this effort is meant to be, like a whole-of-government thing?
It definitely signals that. Look at the list of members. You've got cabinet secretaries from everywhere: state, Treasury, Defense, Interior, Agriculture, HUD, Education. It's extensive. Plus, you've got key White House people. The Deputy Chief of Staff for Legislative Affairs, the Cabinet Secretary, even the Director of Speechwriting, and then, importantly, the heads of cultural agencies. The National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So yes, it really suggests they want this celebration to touch a lot of different areas, maybe international outreach, education, arts, the whole nine yards.
Leveraging the full federal machine then. So how do they make sure all these different players work together effectively?
Well, Task Force 250 is explicitly told to coordinate with all the federal agencies involved, and also with a group that already exists, the United States Semi-Quincentennial Commission. They're meant to plan, organize, and execute the celebration together. And for the nuts and bolts, the administrative side, it's actually housed in the Department of Defense. They provide the funding and support, assuming Congress appropriates the money, of course. That's always the caveat. The timeline's pretty tight, too. Agencies have to report their plans by March 1st, 2025. That's quick. And the task force itself is scheduled to wrap up its work by December 31st, 2026, unless, it gets extended. So yeah, it's a really comprehensive structure designed to pull everything together for a coordinated national effort.
Okay, now digging into what they're planning for this celebration, we find something, well, a bit surprising. There's this idea for a National Garden of American Heroes, a major part of the plan. But it turns out this isn't a totally new concept. It actually has a bit of a history, a complicated one. This new executive order we're talking about, it specifically reinstates two older orders about this National Garden. And the reason it needs reinstating is key: those previous orders. They were actually revoked back in May 2021. So what we're seeing here is a policy U-turn, basically, going back to an earlier plan after it was canceled.
It's definitely a notable policy shift, and the original vision for the National Garden, laid out in those orders that are now back in effect, it was quite specific. The idea was to create this big park full of statues, a place where, quote, legends of America's past will be remembered, and citizens could renew their vision of greatness. It was also framed pretty explicitly as a response to, quote, anti-American extremism that seeks to dismantle our country's history. And the goal was ambitious: get 250 statues of heroes in this garden.
250 statues. That's a lot, and quite a statement. What kinds of people were they thinking of including? And you mentioned controversy. How does that fit in?
Well, the criteria were pretty broad. Historically significant Americans who contributed positively to America throughout our history. But the original orders gave a lot of examples, and the range is huge. You had founding fathers like John Adams, abolitionists like Harriet Tubman, civil rights icons like Martin Luther King Jr., but also scientists, inventors, military figures, athletes like Jackie Robinson, even very recent figures like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Kobe Bryant. And controversial figures, too, like Christopher Columbus were listed. So that wide net inherently touches on those ongoing debates, right? Who counts as significant? Whose contribution is seen as positive? That's where the controversy often lies. Artistically, the orders were very specific, too. The statues had to be lifelike or realistic, not abstract or modernist. And the location needed to be somewhere with natural beauty near a major city. Oh, and interestingly, this new order changes the deadline. The original order said the garden should open before July 4, 2026. This one just says, as expeditiously as possible.
That change in timing feels significant, maybe acknowledging just how big a project this is.
It could be. It certainly gives them more breathing room, maybe reflecting the practical challenges, the potential debates, or just the sheer scale of creating something like that.
And related to remembering history, this new order, it doesn't just focus on making new monuments like the garden. It's also about protecting the ones we already have, right? Because it reinstates another old order, one from June 2020, about protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues, and combating recent criminal violence. Which seems to tie back directly to what you said about the National Guard orders, also mentioning concerns about vandalism.
It does, very directly. And this January 2025 order gives really specific recent reasons for bringing that protection order back. It actually cites, and I'm quoting here, recent examples of conduct necessitating reinstatement, including pro-Hamas-related vandalism of monuments and assaults on federal officers after October 7, 2023. It even lists specific incidents: vandalism at the Treasury Department and Lafayette Square in D.C. in June 2024, and assaults on officers and vandalism at Union Station, the Columbus Fountain, and Freedom Bell in July 2024. So what's really notable here is how it connects the celebration of history with the physical protection of historical markers and ties that protection mandate directly to very current events.
So preservation is just as important as creation in this view, okay? And like most of these things, there's some standard legal stuff at the end, right? The boilerplate, just making clear it doesn't mess with existing agency powers or the budget office or create new legal rights for people to sue the government over it.
Exactly. That's the standard general provision section you see in pretty much every executive order. It's the legal fine print, basically ensuring the order fits within the existing laws, doesn't override other things unintentionally, and reminds everyone that implementation depends on Congress actually funding it, subject to availability of appropriations. Standard stuff. Okay, so let's pull this all together. What does this mean for you, listening to this, as we head towards 2026? Well, it's clear America's 250th birthday is getting major attention at the highest levels, with this big task force aiming for a grand celebration. We've also seen this fascinating back and forth with the National Garden of American Heroes planned, canceled, now back on the table. And alongside that, there's this renewed, very explicit focus on protecting existing monuments linked directly to recent events. It really shows that figuring out how to celebrate America's past, well, it's as complex and sometimes contested as the history itself. It really is. And maybe this leaves us with a question to chew on. When you see these executive orders shifting like this, creating a monument garden, then revoking it, then bringing it back, what does that whole discussion tell us? What does it say about how America is figuring out its identity now? What does it even mean to be historically significant today in the 21st century? How might these official plans shape the conversation as 2026 gets closer? And maybe what role do you think you play or should play in how we remember collectively?